Top story on this Wednesday morning. Former Detective Chief Superintendent of the Met, Kevin Hurley, has called for all officers to be armed.
Yes, this comes after another high-profile incident in London where a man was tasered, then arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a 14-year-old boy.
Now, all of this happened almost at this time yesterday. 5 people treated for injuries, with dramatic footage showing the moment the attacker was stopped by police. Assistant Commissioner Louisa Rolfe said police have found no trace of a prior incident involving the suspect, while the Prime Minister says there is no place for violence like this on our streets.
Well, we're joined this morning by former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
Horrendous incidents like this always provoke the debate, don't they, about whether or not all police should be armed. What's your view in that, given the views this morning that we've heard?
Well, less than 24 hours ago, I was on this channel debating with Kevin Hurley that police officers should not be routinely armed. But since then, I have questioned my standpoint and spent many hours thinking, is my position correct? And I've listened to many learned voices, other police voices, including that of a current serving firearms officer. If we were to routinely arm all our police officers, our frontline uniformed police officers, it would fundamentally change policing forever. And many of the officers currently serving on the front line would not be able to carry a firearm because, of course, they're not trained, but they're not fit enough. And with carrying a firearm comes a huge amount of discipline.
Now, what do you mean fit enough? Fit enough as in technically to fire the guns, or fit enough as in physically fit?
Physically fit, because the current physical fitness test for a police officer, the bar is set fairly low, whereas for firearms officers, it's considerably higher, and rightfully so. Because if we look, for example, to America, I'm not using it as a like-for-like comparison, of course, but if we look to America, tragically, many police officers every year lose their lives courtesy of their own firearms, which are taken from them by criminals and then used to shoot those law enforcement officers. So it is absolutely right that police officers carrying guns are very, very fit and, of course, very disciplined.
Look, Peter, you know, we're going to hear arguments all day. Oh, it'll change the force and we shouldn't have this and goodness me. You've got a whole police force in Northern Ireland where everyone is armed, right? All the officers are armed. Do we notice a darn bit of difference in our policing? No, we do not.
No, although, of course, some would argue the background to officers being armed in Northern Ireland is a very, very different one to mainland UK. I understand the arguments of those who want to push for this, but it would be such a seismic change.
I can honestly say to you, that officers on patrol, officers standing in front of you in the petrol station, whatever, I don't see anybody recoiling at the fact that they have guns.
No, I agree. And when I travel abroad, sometimes if I'm in an airport or if I'm just out and about in a city in Europe, I am somewhat reassured when I'm standing close to a police officer that I see is fit, is trim, is armed. I find that reassuring. But to do it in the UK, where we have no history...
But you are doing it in the UK, you're doing it in Northern Ireland, that's the UK.
I do beg your pardon.
Yeah, but can we just talk about the moment of arrest yesterday of this particular guy? Because a lot of people will have seen this doorbell footage.
He should have just been shot through the head.
You can see that seconds after he's tasered, the armed police arrive. It would have been a matter of seconds if the police had waited for the firearms officers to arrive. Would it have made any difference if they'd have shot him with a gun rather than a taser? You still probably need to have the same sort of range in order for accuracy, especially as you're given that there are members of the public in the area and other officers. I mean, would the outcome yesterday have been different if all of those officers that got there first had been armed instead of the ones that got there seconds later?
Well, we're hypothesising, of course, but many of us will have seen the footage of that female officer as she discharges her taser. Had that taser been a firearm, then I suspect the circumstances would have been identical in that a firearm would have been discharged.
I wonder what, Peter, the story is behind this guy. We don't know yet, and they say that his taser injuries have left him immobile, that he can't talk, he can't do an interview at the moment with all of this. But what on earth was behind this guy and why he did what he did, and the fact that this young lad, this 14-year-old lad, was walking to school and this guy seemingly just attacks him out of the blue.
For me, you raise arguably the most important point about the police investigation that is currently ongoing. Let's just rewind less than 11 months to the tragic events of Nottingham, Valdo Calacani and his murderous spree that he went on, resulting in the loss of 3 lives, Barnaby, Grace and Ian, and the attempted murder of 3 others. That man went to court and pleaded guilty to manslaughter through diminished responsibility, and that caused, quite rightfully, an outrage. I sincerely hope that the police investigation into the background of the man arrested yesterday is very thorough in that it explores any potential illegal drug use. I have no evidence to suggest that that man has gone down that route in the past, but I am strongly suggesting that that investigation must look at that in great thoroughness, because if this man, and these are if, buts and maybes, I accept that, if this man is to later claim diminished responsibility through a mental illness, and if there is a history of drug taking in the past, that might negate that. He may not be able to enter that.
You see, we're sitting here, we're debating this, and we're giving it the due attention that it deserves. But I ask our viewers and listeners today, would any of you be distressed today if he had been shot dead, shot through the head? I reckon if he had just been shot and it was over and done with quickly, the evidence is there. He's got a sword in his hand, for goodness sake. He killed this young lad, and other people are very seriously injured as well because of all of this. Who would care? Who would care?
Some people think that
he would be dirt in the ground?
Killing perpetrators gives them an easy out. They don't have to answer for their actions, and sending people to jail gives them a long time to think about that. What about knife amnesties? What about, better enforcement of the laws that exist around zombie knives, around samurais? Because the government have done a lot to try and cut this down. Is it the role of social media in making it too easy for youngsters to get hands on these? I mean, there have to be more questions asked about the issue of knives here in the UK, rather than necessarily just about guns for the police.
I think there is a very worrying trend of copycat offending. I've already alluded to those dreadful events in Nottingham of last year, and let's look at that Sydney attack in Australia that happened in that shopping mall only a couple of short weeks ago, when a man again went on the rampage, killing many people armed with a bladed weapon. Is there copycat offending? Do we need more police officers? We're never going to live in a crime-free nirvana, I know that, but do we need more police patrolling? Do we need more legislation? The Home Office have promised some of that. But yes, these big headline questions need to be asked and answers need to be found.
The dilemma, of course, is that as soon as a firearms officer discharges their weapon, they're put on immediate suspension. And you've got to wonder, do the people who carry firearms, are they adequately supported? And I use support in every sense of the word with this. But these people who buy these swords, who use these swords, who go on the rampage publicly, have got to know there's only going to be one outcome, and that's a bullet through the head. And it seems to be that they don't seem to care.
Well, forgive me if I sound like I'm nitpicking here, Eamonn, but police officers do not aim at the head. You aim at the torso, because that is the area most likely to stop that person doing what they're doing, and it's also a bigger target, so it's a more effective way of discharging a gun. Yes, I quite agree. However, there is a huge question to be asked about this type of offending, which is becoming more prevalent. Maybe there needs to be some joined-up thinking. We are yet to hear whether there is any history of mental illness. There certainly was with Valdo Calacani in Nottingham, and greater steps could have been taken to stop that man or arrest him before his offending. Many, many questions remain unanswered. Tragically, a 14-year-old boy lies dead, and of course, members of the public were injured, and 2 heroic police officers have had to undergo surgery.
Peter,
praise those heroes.
What message has the general public, has the people watching and listening to us today, what have they got to take away? What have they got to ask themselves? We've got an election coming up this year. What do you think the question for the general public is to come to terms with?
What kind of police service do we want? Do we want a visible, street patrolling, robust, stop and searching type of police service, or do we want a social service, which is what we currently have in so many regards?